You good, bro?
Nah, man.
So,
First off, man just graduated from medical school. You get me?
congratulations.
Love. But the thing is, when I think about F1, I'm shook, bro. Hey, you should try checking out the Mansa Medic, the YouTube channel. Helped him a
Medic?
lot. The Mansa Medic. Yo, check it out.
Promise you, I know how it is. I and every F2 and above have been there. That period of limbo between medical school and starting work as a foundation doctor, when there's a whole parade of emotions that may leave you somewhat overwhelmed with the prospect that you're going to be responsible for people's lives. I'm here to fill you in on what I wish somebody would have told me before starting work as an F1 doctor. And at the end, I'm going to drop an extra gem that helped me throughout my foundation years in the UK, and resources that I still use today that help me in my clinical practice. So lesson number 1, you are never the finished product. Unless you are a generational genius, it's impossible for you to remember every single thing that you've learned in medical school. So there's always gonna be scope to learn. You might find that the gaps in your knowledge cause you to question yourself, asking yourself things like, am I competent enough? Will I make a mistake? Will I gain the trust from my colleagues and patients? Will I be a good doctor? These are only a few of the questions that were going through my head before starting in F1. And it caused me quite a bit of anxiety. And that anxiety led to a feeling of imposter syndrome that lasted quite a bit throughout my foundation years. I had this feeling that I had to remember everything. I built a picture, which I'm not sure where it came from, that everybody would have expected me to be the best and remember everything at medical school, and any kind of slip up or mistake would result me in being reported and struck off by the GMC.
You're fired.
Here's some comfort for you. You are not the finished product. In fact, you will never be the finished product, because this is a profession that requires an infinite amount of learning right up until the day you retire. You are never finished. And have some reassurance that people generally do not expect you to remember and know everything before starting as a foundation doctor. To be honest, a lot of the times you're going to be doing jobs that people don't really want to do. So rather than thinking about having to know everything, the foundation years are more about development. Think about how can you use these years to develop your systems of clinical practice that you can then take for the rest of your career. Now's the time to form those good habits to become that doctor that you really want to be in the future. But what do I mean by systems? Systems are basically your clinical algorithms. How do you operate and what codes do you use when you're approaching a certain situation? What really helped me during my F1 and F2 years, especially if I was called to see an acutely unwell patient, would be honing down on my A to E's. Standard. If I'm approaching a situation, that is the first thing I'm doing. A to E, every patient. Always check the BNF before prescribing. Dose, contraindications, side effects, interactions. Very, very important to make that a habit, because nowadays there's so much to remember, and it's good knowing that you have that resource that you can fall back on for those little details that you might miss if you relied on memory alone. As time goes on, you develop your style and incorporate your own algorithms and systems of how you would approach acute situations. And here are some systems that I would recommend for dealing with those chronic patients that you'd find on the ward. Have a checklist in your mind that each day you clock into work, you cover these things and you know that you would be safe. Let's go through a couple. Details of the patient. You'd be surprised how many times notes get mixed up, leading to incorrect documentation. Always check the details of the patient. Is there a DNA-R in place? How many days have they been in hospital? What is the past medical history? What current and resolved issue or issues is the patient facing during the hospital stay? This gives a summary of the patient issues that are currently going through, which gives you a snapshot as to why the patient has been in hospital. Go through the investigations. What has the patient had? Have they had bloods, x-rays, echoes, ECGs, all kinds of investigations, and go through them and think, does this evidence support the current diagnosis and management plan of the patient? Sometimes you might find that the evidence points towards a different diagnosis, and because you've done your due diligence, you've then affected that patient's care in a good way because you've got more information. What is the trend of the news? Is the patient stable? Is the patient getting any better? What medications have been withheld or stopped, and why? I'll give you an example. Patient comes in and they're vomiting blood. You might find that that same patient might have been on a blood thinning medication, a DOAC such as apixaban, due to a history of atrial fibrillation, and therefore this medication was stopped due to their presenting complaint. What medications have been started whilst in hospital? What are your examination findings? Have you found anything new that requires a change in management? For example, a patient may have come in for acute pancreatitis, which is usually treated with aggressive fluids, although that has recently changed. You may find that over a few days, the patient might start to develop fluid overload, and because of your examination, you were able to point that out and send the patient to get the correct care that they needed. Are there any other specialities involved in the patient's care? If so, why? What are they helping to manage? Is there an estimated discharge date? And document any updates. Documentation is going to be your best friend. As annoying as it is, detailed documentation will save you in the long run. So having these systems in acute and chronic cases really helped keep me grounded in situations of uncertainty, because I had my own algorithm that I developed to fall back on. Remember, the foundation years is not to prove what you've learned, but to develop your system of clinical practice and forming your own algorithm that will form good habits for you for now and in the future. Lesson number 2. Never be afraid to ask questions. This can't be understated, I swear down. You have to lower all sense of pride and ego and just think about the patients that you're going to help in the future by asking that question and taking that risk of appearing like a quote-unquote idiot or somebody that's incompetent. Think about the kind of doctor that you want to become in the future and what steps do you need to take to get to that point. Remember, in the beginning, we said you're not the final product and there's a lot of learning to do. And in order to get to that, you have to ask questions, regardless of how you feel you'll be perceived. So let's take a worst case scenario. Let's say you ask a question and you're belittled because it's seen as stupid. You got 2 approaches that I can think of. The first approach is you allow the comments to get to you and you internalize whatever comments you receive from the person you asked. Because you've internalized these comments of being perceived as asking a stupid question, you then see this as a reflection of your ability as a doctor, and imposter syndrome may start to creep in. Approach 2 is you remember that someone else's perspective is not a reflection of your ability as a doctor, because you know how much effort you've put in and you know how much you know and what you've done to make it this far into your career. You remember that you're asking these questions for the sake of your future patients, and no matter what you get now, you understand the long-term goal. That doesn't mean take disrespect from anyone. No matter how senior the person may be, it's always important to speak out if you feel like you've been disrespected. Having said that, don't expect everyone to spoon-feed you information. You have to demonstrate that you can take initiative. So for example, if you're in a situation and you're unfamiliar, you're not really sure how to proceed, try and figure out like, oh, what can I do to actually try and solve the issue? And if you've exhausted all your options and then ask for help, you'd find that people will be a lot more willing to answer whatever query you may have because you've taken the initiative and you haven't just gone to get spoon-fed information. This ability to take initiative is what separates a student from a doctor. I'm not saying that students don't take initiative, but you know what I mean. But to be honest, on the whole, I found that when you ask questions, people are generally happy to help because they see that you're curious and you want to get better as a doctor. I don't know where the fear comes from asking questions and being perceived as an idiot. That actually doesn't happen as often as you might think. People are generally willing to help. So if there's any query, just ask. Lesson number 3, look after your mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. It's very easy for these things to get drained in this profession. How can I, as a patient, expect my doctor to look after me if they can't even look after themselves? It's easier said than done, but we must lead by example. And we must remember that by looking after ourselves, we inadvertently look after our patients because we are in an optimized position to do our job in the best way we possibly can. Burnout risk. More than half, 63% of trainee doctors reported feeling at a high or moderate risk of burnout. This is GMC National Training Surveys, and the most recent figure. So this is higher than during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you imagine? Over 40% of trainee medics dentists had felt unwell as a result of work-related stress in the preceding year. Now, I acknowledge there's predominantly an institutional and organizational aspect to these statistics, but there's also individual accountability to self-care. You are not completely powerless, and you do have a degree of control over how you work and what you're entitled. So what did this look like? How can you implement self-care whilst working in such a demanding profession? Well, number 1, enforce your breaks without guilt. You are not letting anyone down by taking time to recharge. Number 2, enforce your teaching and your self-development time. Remember, you're there to learn, you're there to develop. You're entitled to that study time specific. You are not just there just to be a service provider. And it's important that you take charge in your learning. If you're on the night shift, nights are even more mentally draining. So it's important that you take those breaks and really take time to recharge. Speak to your rota coordinator if you feel like your shifts are burning you out. Remember, you are not just given everything and you have to follow. You do have a degree of control and influence over how you work. Speak to your rota coordinator. And if you're finding that you're getting resistance, so you're not really getting any help, then use the BMA rota checker and speak to BMA, because they can help you and they can recognize if you're being taken for granted. Your colleagues are there to help you. If you find that you're not able to finish tasks, hand over for your colleagues to take over. We're a team and we are there to ease the pressure over you. So use your colleagues for help. Remember, your aim is to leave work behind as soon as you walk through those doors when your shift ends. You could even consider less than full-time training to allow that balance of life and work and having that mental resilience to continue in this profession over the long term. You don't want to get burnt out. So these are things to consider. If you are not in your optimum state, you may provide suboptimal care to your patients. So it's all about the patients at the end of the day. Lesson number 4. Pay attention to your finances. Finances are important. We don't get any financial knowledge or education in medical school, hardly anything. If you did, you're very lucky. Here's another interesting fact. The high cost of living coupled with poor financial management skill contributes to a staggering number of junior doctors who are actively researching leaving the NHS or taking career breaks. Can you imagine? You know, things are hard in the UK as it is. So I can imagine that, you know, financial issues can cause an enormous amount of stress, which can lead to people leaving. So getting on top of your finances is very important. Doctors start earning a significant salary much later than their non-medical peers, but poor financial decisions like insufficient savings or improper insurance for the first 5 to 10 years of the career can have an exponential negative effect on their long-term wealth, retirement, and ability to fund their training. Interesting. It's like all of a sudden you've gone from student to working full-time, earning a monthly salary, and most of the time we come into this unprepared. But I think there are some essentials to be aware of when navigating the financial world. I mean, these are just like the tip of the iceberg. You can go into so much detail in your own time, but just a few bullet points I think are important to bear in mind. It's important to know your payslip inside out. Understand what the codes mean. You know, it's valuable to understand your tax bracket, personal allowance, your pensionable pay, you know, if you're in the scheme, what's gross and what's locum, what student loans are being deducted and what plan are you on. That way, if there are any discrepancies, you understand, because you understand what the codes mean. So for example, I'll give you an example. So when I did F1 in Wales, in single accommodations, you get free accommodation. I was in double, so I was paying very, very, very little rent, all inclusive. You'll never find this anywhere. And this was an incentive to attract people to go to Wales. It was a benefit from the government. But what that meant was my tax code changed. I ended up paying a bit more tax because it was seen as a benefit. So when I started F2, I left the F1 accommodation and started renting privately. But the tax code didn't change. I rotated in August and I didn't really understand it until I started to look into my tax code and started to realize December, January, that I was getting a lot less than what I would expect for a personal allowance. The typical personal allowance amount is 1,275 tax-free. I was getting less than that. And that prompted me to look into my tax code a bit further, and I found that they didn't register that I had left my accommodation and they thought I was still getting the benefit of the free or reduced rent from being on hospital accommodation. Number 2, claim your tax relief. Please tell me that I'm not the only one that didn't know about tax relief until after starting foundation years. So we as healthcare professionals have to pay annual fees to remain registered. For example, GMC, you got BMA fees. We can actually claim back tax on these expenditures. And I'll give you a few things that we can also claim on. So you've got GMC fees, you've got your BMA membership fees, medical indemnity subscriptions, Royal College membership fees, Royal College examination fees. You can also claim for resits and associated costs for the examination, such as travel and accommodation. And all you have to do is just type in claim tax relief on Google and go on the government website and fill out all the details on how much you've spent on examinations and registration fees or whatever you can claim tax on. and you pay less tax. So that could be quite beneficial. Every little helps, you know? And don't forget about your blue light card for exclusive NHS discounts on big brands. This can take you a long way. Every little helps. We could make a whole video just talking about finances alone, but I just wanted to provide that spark just to have, you know, something to think about when it comes to finances. That is not something you should know, and you should take an active role in understanding your finances. So here are some bonus resources that helped me survive my foundation years and apps that I still use to this day. Number one, the Foundation Handbook app. This for me is probably the best resource for foundation years. It summarizes the majority of the acute cases that you need to be aware of and common conditions in summarized algorithms that you can just work through if you're in a situation that you need to jog your memory and you're not sure exactly what to do. BMJ Best Practice is an incredible resource for overall reading around a particular topic. Let's say you've come across a patient with a rare disease or something you're not really familiar with on the wards and you want to do extra reading on diagnosis, investigations, and management. The BMJ Best Practice app for me is the best. Now you do have to register with an institution like your library or your university. But yeah, this is something I would highly recommend in all cases. Buku Medicine, I really like this because it, you know, summarizes a lot of key conditions for hematology, rheumatology, renal medicine in a way that the Foundation app doesn't really. So for example, explaining the highs and lows of blood tests, like particularly hematology, all those different parameters you'll see in the full blood count, for example. And finally, iResus. If you ever do emergency medicine or any kind of on-calls where, you know, you've seen an acutely unwell patient, iResus is an amazing resource for those acute situations. There's a quote that I like saying that you are not a walking textbook. You are a clinical firefighter, and firefighters follow protocols. That's in essence what you're there to learn. You're there to learn algorithms and protocols and create your own systems and habits that you can take for the rest of your career. So remember, you're there to learn, ask questions, be curious, use your resources, use your colleagues, and you're embarking on an amazing journey. If you give, it will give back to you. Just keep applying yourself. If you've made it this far to the video, you've made it to the end, I just want to give thanks. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. It helps the algorithm push this forward. And yeah, I just really appreciate your attention. And yeah, I'm just gonna, you know, like I said, carry on as new. Still getting to know my style, and yeah, we'll see you in the next video.